Hi, hello. Good morning from Berlin, and I'm really happy to be with you. So it's great to join. Just trying to share the presentation. Okay, hope that you can hear me now. And yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. And today I would like to talk to you about rail aspects and what we figured out in the last years and what we are going to do in the next years, which is even more exciting. So I'm not only the managing director of MGA, which is the leading international network for additive manufacturing in Europe. I'm also responsible for AM within Deutsche Bahn. That's the German railway company and one of the biggest in Europe. And we entered additive manufacturing 7 years ago, and we were really excited about the huge challenges and even more about the opportunities we can get with additive manufacturing. And there's a great insight, a great study of a bank, a Dutch ING bank, which says that by the year 2040, 50% of all parts worldwide will be printable. And I just counted it a couple of weeks ago. We have now more than 50 different technologies in AM. And so the railway sector in general is now trying to explore those. The guys in the rail industry would like to print big parts, things which are missing. So we are coming from an obsolescence logic, parts we can get our hands on anymore. And therefore, we need, of course, certification. We are often talking about railway parts which are safety relevant. And of course, they have to be printable in costs which are competitive to former technologies. And sometimes we need, or also quite often we would need, forged parts, so very high strength parts in general. Those are the technologies we use most often, which is FDM, due to the flame retardant structure. Then we use powder bed fusion, we use multi-jet fusion and DED, and mostly wire arc additive manufacturing. So you're all experts, you know what it means to print very big parts for rail. That is due to cost aspects that we can't use powder bed a lot. So this is why we figured out about wire arc additive manufacturing. In total, we use a dozen technologies. We use that for quite small parts. So in the rail industry and as a rail operator, we are not a producer of trains. You sometimes need little parts, for instance, for signs if the train can't go on the tracks. So then you have to use buses. And therefore, we need little signs in the stations, and those we print meanwhile. We need a lot of elastomers, and those elastomers are also needed for different use cases. So, for instance, seals or bellows or muffles or even more elastic pieces. And we were looking for technology to print rubber or rubber equivalents, and we are quite close to have found that. And you might have also followed the discussion with Cora Leibig, the founder of Chromatics. So they are also one of those potential suppliers of printed elastomers. And what is really interesting is we often have to put those spare parts on our warehouse. It's a physical warehouse, of course, and usually if those parts, those elastomers, belong to the braking system, we have to throw them away after 3 years due to safety aspects. And other regular parts we have to throw away after 6 years. So even if we haven't used them, and therefore it really makes a lot of sense to print them on demand. Sometimes we have other use cases. This is also quite typical. It's a part of the door. It's a door element, which we couldn't get anymore. So that produced a standstill of regional trains, and we prevented that with a printed part from polymers. We also have a very interesting train with which we use for the testing of new technologies or also interior aspects. So sometimes we have to bring in parts which you haven't seen before, and this is also a cover, a quite big one, which has to meet the very high levels of flame retardancy. And the level of flame retardancy in rail is even higher than in the aviation industry. And so we have this very big task to find the right material, ideally in different technologies. This is also quite typical for the rail industry in general. So we need parts of components. And sometimes this little cover, which belongs to the window wiper water tank, breaks. And then we have to replace the whole water tank. That causes a lot of time and, of course, costs. And if we can just print the little tank cover, which is maybe about 3 to 5 euros, it's nearly nothing, then the train can also go on the tracks quite fast. Another cost-reducing example is those signs in Braille scripture for people who are handicapped and can't see properly anymore. And with that part, which we print now, formerly it was milled, we reduce the cost by half. And by using another technology, we will also cut those costs again for about 15% this year. And if you bear in mind that we have more than 5,000 stations in Germany, you see that the potential and the cost reduction potential is quite high. And last year we discovered tooling for rail. And every 6 years, approximately, a train has to undergo a big maintenance overhaul. And during that maintenance overhaul, those trains are colored again. And therefore, you need a lot of manual labor. For instance, also to cover such lights, and you usually do this with sticking materials, and then you spray them with color. And with our new tool, which we printed on a big FDM machine in a elastic material, we just have to put it on and take it off again. So we save time, and we also save waste because we don't have the sticky material which was polluted with color. Also very nice feature are those little auxiliaries we use for sticking stickers and the right place. So before, our workers had to measure that, and now they can just put it on the headrest, and it saves approximately 3 minutes per seat. And if you have in mind that in a train you have between 400 to 800 seats, and you have a lot of trains, so you can imagine that that is really worth thinking about it. So this is the management summary of where we use additive manufacturing in trains in general, as a solution for obsolescence problems, also for functional integration, to save production costs, no minimum amount of ordered parts anymore, to ensure availability, and to produce aids and jigs and fixtures, as well as supporting lean projects. And yeah, in the rail industry, we talk about spare parts also, which might be safety relevant. So therefore, we have to test our providers. Usually we print with printing service bureaus. We also, all the railway companies now start also to have own machines, but the majority of printed parts is produced with external service providers. And therefore we've designed an audit system in cooperation with the certification body, and everyone has to prove that they went or did undergo this audit logic. Also, of course, if we produce on own machines, by the way. And I'm not just talking about Deutsche Bahn, I'm also talking about other European railway companies. And as you can imagine, they have very similar parts, like, for instance, an axle box cover. And that belongs to the wheel system. And if something breaks, you would not want to imagine what might happen. So we have to test this. They printed it in wire arc additive manufacturing, and it turned out as a good solution. As well as a very other typical part from, in this case, from the Dutch railways NS, it's a tablet holder. And all those railway companies have very similar parts. They all use tablets or screens, and from generation to generation, those screens change in size. And therefore, we need those holders and housings to adopt also the size of those little hubs. You all know about the Hyperloop, and even the Hyperloop produces bellow rail brakes in additive manufacturing. And with it, they also reduced the weight of those parts because it had to be a lightweight solution. And that was even in the 3D Pioneers Challenge, which is organized yearly. And last year, they won a prize for this very interesting design. So in the railway industry in general, additive manufacturing is very important because that offers a second sourcing opportunity, and sometimes even an in-house production. But to give you an idea, at Deutsche Bahn, it took us 6 years to decide whether we want to buy an own machine, and this is what we've done in the meantime. The railway companies do a lot of technology scouting. At the moment, they are focusing on rapid casting and on DED. They do material scouting, and here they focus on elastomers and flame retardant polymers. Also, metal solutions are approved, especially concerning the strength. The integration of procurement and the procurement of new trains is a very new task. I'll come back to that later. And of course, if you try to implement additive manufacturing in your company, you always have to deal with change management aspects, and you have to train your internal specialists. Digital supply chain plays a role, and usually we do not have the 3D drawings for our spare parts. So this is why we have to digitize those parts before we can print them. And some of the railways in Europe do dedicated printing scanning days in their maintenance workshops. Railways in general consider themselves as the most sustainable transport mode. So of course also additive manufacturing has to fulfill those needs. And therefore we are all focusing on sustainability and on a digital warehouse. And we want to enhance the number of repaired parts with AM. I already talked about the sustainability aspect, and we all suffer from different catastrophes in the last 2 years. So therefore, we need solutions which are sustainable and solutions which help us to bridge the gap until the supply chains work again. And from a recycling aspect, I wanted to draw your attention to a very interesting startup coming from Germany. They recycle filament, and they have funny names. In this case, this material is called meshed unicorn. And so you have really interesting materials as well as also colors. Coming to the opportunity to save weight and material with the redesign of parts, I just want to draw your attention to this cargo hinge. It's a holder. It's big as a fist approximately. And that was one example. We redesigned, and as you can see, there are of course still some support structure, but with that part, we realized significant yeah, savings of weight, of waste. So the first one is the milled part. The second one, as you can see, is print, not the printed part. Yeah, but with printing, we can save up to 50% of weight, as well as energy consumption. I have to apologize that those slides are still in German, but we also save energy consumption, and in this case really a lot, and also CO2 emissions with the printed parts. Of course, you have to do an analysis like this for every part you want to print, but you can, if you want to, realize a lot of effect. And that is really important because nowadays we talk a lot about lightweight construction, which, to be honest, does not play a big role in rail at the moment. But if you try to analyze where your materials, your raw materials come from, those usually do not come from democratic countries. So there might be an interrupted supply chain from one day up to the other, which we all experienced, for instance, in Russia last year. And therefore, we have to focus on lighter designs in the future. And this is why additive manufacturing is also considered as a green technology, due to lightweight construction, on-demand production, localized production, and the extended use, as well as material marking and the use of recycled materials. So now you might ask, what are the next big steps? I already mentioned that we want to integrate additive manufacturing now in the procurement of new trains, and then we have also the freedom of design. So we solve not only obsolescence problems, but we can now optimize 3D printable parts and think about testing and certification right from the beginning. And that starts this year in Germany, and the Dutch colleagues already have started this last year. Then we also have to think more about the reduction of weight if we want to redesign trains. So we have to fulfill also levels of certain X-load weight capacities. And if you want to bring in new technologies or new seats or whatever, then you have to figure out how to keep the same level of weight. And that will be more important in the future. Like Wabtec already proved this as a supplier with certain parts. We also take a look on new technologies, in this case, liquid metal printing. You can see that those are still little movies from Xerox. Unfortunately, they decided not to be in this industry anymore, but there are already some competitors who are taking over. As well as microprinting. We all need electronics, and we just recently figured out what might be the future on that, or macro printing for big parts. Mobile smart factory aspects to print very much there where you need it is a future thing, and the absorption of noise will be interesting, especially in the rail sector. Maybe we even offer printed food in the future. I already tried that. That is even with stem cells, so it really tastes like meat. It is meat, but no animal had to die for that. Printing of concrete is a future task. As you can see here, we printed the first part in a, it's like a powder bed logic. It's called cement activation. And we printed a station bench with this technology. And this we do not only do alone, but we have working groups in our network where we try to do this in cooperation with other companies and to overcome hurdles we still have in the technology. So last week, we just recently kicked off our new working group about veterinary medicine. So we're not only talking about rail use cases, that grew in the last years a lot. And we meet in the whole network again in September in Berlin, 26 and 27. That is also a conference which you can join, or you can visit us in Berlin in our industrial additive manufacturing hub. That is in the south of Berlin, and Berlin is now developing as the capital of additive manufacturing. If you need some more use cases or want to read about those, you can visit our weboostam.com website, where you can also find information about technical standard and a material compass. And in the network, we have a lot of users, printing service bureaus, institutes, R&D, machining producers, consultancies, software companies, and material providers. And so the next big thing for us will also be a students competition we organize yearly. And maybe you have some young students who would like to take part. I would just like to encourage you for that. So if you would like to become a member of our network, you're more than welcome. And thank you so much for your attention. And I would be happy to answer your questions now.
Bit of a Q&A session right now for the next 5 or so minutes if you have time. In case you don't know, you can ask your questions directly in the Q&A section, which is just next to the chat, and you can also upvote them so we can pick the most popular. For now, I'll just wait for a little bit as we get some questions in, but once again, thank you so much for your presentation, and I actually did have a question for you, which is, oh wait, we actually just got something in as well. Okay, well, I'll ask this too. We have an anonymous question that says, are you already using virtual warehouse software for 3D printed parts?
Yes, we do, but we would like to enhance that too. So, of course, if you just print a couple of parts, you do not that much software as if you want to really enhance the number of printed parts to like 10% in the upcoming years, what we are now planning for. So our goal is until 2030 that we have 10% of our parts just in a digital warehouse, and therefore you need a mighty software solution. But of course, in a huge corporate, you also need a software which is applicable with your existing systems, like SAP and others, so that they talk to each other. This is another challenge we have.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. I think it's a struggle for a lot of people who are adopting it. Well, feel free still to put in any... Actually, a few questions have come in. One is including if you could just quickly show the VDI student conference link again, if you have your presentation. That would be quick. And well, I'll let you do that, and then we have a couple of other questions. Also, feel free to upvote the questions if there's one in particular you would like answered. We have another few minutes, but still.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just give you a moment to find it before I ask
you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, can you see it now?
I don't
Can you
think
see my
you're
slide?
sharing right now.
I'm not sharing. Okay. No, it doesn't want anymore.
Okay. Well,
But I could maybe now. Time. Can you see it now?
no, but if it's a link, yes, we can. Yes.
Okay, so that will take place in Düsseldorf, in Germany, at the end of April. And so the students can come there and talk about a use case and develop a business case around this use case. And they do not know before what that use case will be. So last year we had a use case concerning exoskeletons, and those students groups, and it's really good if they are diverse from different business and production and engineering. If they come together in a diverse group, it makes a lot of sense, and then they can design a business case and print parts on site, as at least some prototypes, and they really have a lot of fun, and we do have too. And of course there are also some recruiters on site, and some companies sponsoring this event. And of course they know that if there are students who are coming for a weekend, those are the really good ones. They can offer a contract immediately. So this is really interesting. And as we're talking about this dates, maybe it's also interesting that in the network we will also be on a tech journey next end of next week that will start to New York and Boston. This is what we offer regularly. So last winter we went to Israel, which was also very interesting. And we also have our own annual meeting. I already mentioned that. And at the day one of this annual meeting, we have a Women in AM conference in cooperation with Women in 3D Printing. And that is another format. It's just in person. It takes place in Berlin, and it's really great atmosphere. Unfortunately, no men are allowed, not on the stage and not in the audience. But this is a women-only event. Yeah.
Well, very.
And
Oh, sorry.
sorry.
Oh, I interrupted you. Please.
Yeah, no problem. So the last years we are now doing it for the 5th time this year. And last year I asked the women in the audience, do you want also to have the gents here? And they refused because they enjoy it so much, being just in a women-only conference. And I come from the rail sector, and the number of women in the rail sector is quite low. But in the additive manufacturing sector, it's just half of that. We are now about 13% in total. And there we want to encourage women to enter a stage and then maybe go to different conferences where they can do this for everyone.
Very exciting. And then unfortunately, our time is now up.